I never planned to hide my success. Growing up in a simple family in Cleveland taught me the importance of staying humble and working hard. My father, a mechanic, would come home every evening with hands covered in grease and a tired but warm smile. My mother, a nurse, worked long hours, often pulling back-to-back shifts just to help me achieve my dreams. Mia, she used to tell me, success isn't about how much you own or how fancy your life looks. It's about the kind of person you are. Those words stayed with me, shaping how I saw the world and my goals in life. By the time I turned 25, I had started a small consulting business in my garage. It wasn't anything fancy at first, just me, my laptop, and lots of late nights. But I didn't give up. 3 years later, that small idea turned into a company called Multi-Tech Solutions. Today, it's worth over $300 million, but even with that success, I've always kept things low-key. I didn't care about the spotlight. I found happiness in working behind the scenes and focusing on what really mattered. Everything changed the day I met Andrew. It was an ordinary afternoon, and I was sitting in a neighborhood coffee shop, going through some contracts. I wasn't dressed to impress, just my usual jeans and a sweater. Suddenly, Andrew bumped into my table and knocked over my coffee. "Oh no. I'm so sorry," he said, scrambling to pick up my papers before the coffee could ruin them. I could see he was genuinely worried, and his panic made me smile. "It's okay," I said with a laugh. What he didn't know was that those papers were part of a multi-million-dollar business deal. Andrew offered to buy me another coffee to make up for the spill. "Let me fix this," he said, looking so sincere that I couldn't say no. "I'm Andrew, by the way." "I'm Mia," I replied, still smiling. "And sure, I'll take you up on that coffee." That coffee turned into a long dinner, and before I knew it, we were spending more and more time together. Andrew wasn't like anyone I had ever met before. He was kind, down-to-earth, and passionate about his work as a high school teacher. He loved helping his students and talked about his job with so much joy. The best part? Andrew never asked me about my wealth, because he didn't know about it. I told him I worked as an executive assistant at Multi-Tech Solutions. It wasn't exactly a lie. I did take care of many tasks at the company, but what I didn't tell him was that I owned it. I wanted him to love me for who I was, not for my money or success. Everything seemed perfect between us, until one day it wasn't. I met Andrew's mother, Kate, a few months into our relationship. Kate Beckinsale was the kind of person who wanted to look rich and important, even if it wasn't true. Her house was full of fake designer items, and she loved talking about imaginary connections to high society people. From the very beginning, it was clear she didn't like me. "So, you're a secretary?" she asked during our first family dinner. Her sharp tone made it clear she didn't think much of me. "Andrew, darling, wasn't there a surgeon's daughter I introduced you to?" "Mom," Andrew said, sounding irritated, "we've talked about this." But she wouldn't let it go. "I just think, considering our family standing, you could aim a little higher. The Beckinsales have always married well." I couldn't help but notice the irony. Andrew had already told me the truth about his family. They weren't wealthy at all. They lived a middle-class life, propped up by credit card debt and a lot of pretending. "I like my job," I said calmly. "It's fulfilling." Kate gave a dismissive sniff. "Well, someone has to do those things, I suppose." Her passive-aggressive comments became a regular part of family gatherings. At Christmas, while everyone else got thoughtful gifts, I received a plain office planner. "For keeping your boss's schedule," she said with a smirk. Andrew often apologized to me later, but he never confronted her directly. I understood that family dynamics can be complicated, so I let it go most of the time. But then, one Friday dinner changed everything. Kate stormed into the room holding a newspaper. "Multi-Tech Solutions is looking for a new CEO," she announced dramatically. "This is my chance." I almost choked on my wine. It was true, my company, Multi-Tech Solutions, was searching for a new CEO. But the process was extremely selective, and Kate wasn't exactly qualified. "You're applying?" Andrew asked, looking genuinely surprised. "Of course," she replied with excitement. "After 21 years in middle management, it's time for me to move into the big leagues." She turned to me with a confident look. "Mia, why don't you put in a good word for me?" though I doubt your recommendation carries much weight. I kept my expression neutral. I'll see what I can do. Don't bother, she said, waving her hand dismissively. I've already called in some favors. The board will be impressed with my credentials. What she didn't know was that I was the board. The following week, Kate showed up at Multi-Tech Solutions for her interview, dressed in a loud, flashy suit that screamed for attention. I watched from my private office as Kate, Andrew's mother, loudly talked about her qualifications in the lobby. She sounded confident, as if she already had the job. Mrs. Beckinsale, my assistant said politely, the board is ready for you. Kate straightened her back, adjusted her outfit, and confidently marched into the conference room. But as soon as she stepped inside and saw me sitting at the head of the table, her confidence faded. Mia, she stammered, her eyes wide with shock. What are you doing here? I looked at her calmly. Running my company, I replied evenly. Please have a seat. Her face turned pale as the truth sank in. She glanced around the room, seeing the board members seated beside me. This can't be, she whispered. One of the board members nodded. It is. Paul is our founder and majority shareholder. Kate's carefully built image started to fall apart. She stumbled into a chair, clearly overwhelmed. I opened her application file and placed it on the table. Let's go over your qualifications, I said in a professional tone. As I reviewed her resume, it quickly became clear that much of it was exaggerated or completely made up. I questioned every detail, and the more I pressed, the more her so-called achievements unraveled. Her claims of important connections and impressive accomplishments didn't hold up under scrutiny. Finally, I closed the file and looked at her. I think we're done here, I said firmly. Your application is disqualified due to false information. You can't do this, she cried, her voice shaking with anger. This is personal. No, it's not, I replied, my tone calm but firm. It's professional. But since you brought it up, let me say this. I've put up with your insults and disrespect for months. This isn't revenge, Kate, it's accountability. Without another word, she stormed out of the room, muttering threats about how she would tell Andrew everything. I stayed calm, already reaching for my phone. It was time Andrew heard the truth from me, not her. Later that day, Andrew walked into my office. His face was a mix of confusion and concern. Mom just called me, crying, he said. She said you're her boss. Mia, what's going on? I motioned for him to sit down and took a deep breath. Andrew, there's something I need to tell you. I wasn't completely honest about who I am because I didn't want to complicate our relationship. But now, I can't avoid it anymore. Let me show you. A few minutes later, Andrew stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in my office. He looked out at the breathtaking view of the city and then at the nameplate on my desk, Mia Paul, founder and CEO. He turned to the wall lined with awards and newspaper articles about Multi-Tech Solutions. So, you're not a secretary, he said, his voice calm but thoughtful. No, I admitted, stepping beside him. I'm not. I started M-Tech when I was just 25, I explained softly. The company your mom made fun of me for working at, I built it from nothing. Andrew's expression shifted, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. Why would you hide something like this, Mia? Why lie to me? I didn't want anyone to see just my money or my success, I replied honestly. Do you know how many people have tried to get close to me just because of my wealth or my status? I wanted someone to love me for who I am, not for what I own. Andrew let out a deep sigh, his face softening as he thought about my words. I get that, he said after a moment. But you let my mom treat you terribly. You could have stopped all of this months ago. And what would that have done? Asked, my voice calm, but firm. It would have just proven her obsession with status, her belief that wealth is what defines a person's value. I didn't want to play her game. Andrew rubbed the back of his neck, guilt written all over his face. You're right, he said quietly. I should have stood up for you. I failed you there. Before I could respond, the door to my office burst open. Kate stormed in, dragging her husband, James, behind her. Her face was red with anger, and she looked ready for a fight. There she is. The liar. The manipulator, she shouted, pointing at me. James, who usually stayed quiet, stepped forward. Mia, he began carefully, this feels unprofessional. Using your position to reject Kate because of personal disagreements doesn't seem fair. I didn't let him finish. Instead, I pressed a button on my desk, and the recording of Kate's interview played aloud. Her stumbling responses and exaggerated claims filled the room. This wasn't personal, I said firmly when the recording ended. Your wife lied on her application and misrepresented her qualifications. The board made its decision based on the facts. Kate's face twisted in rage. You think you've won, don't you? Just wait until everyone hears about this. The so-called genius CEO who pretended to be a secretary just to worm her way into our family. Mom, stop. Andrew's voice thundered, silencing the room. Just stop. Do you even hear yourself? You're embarrassing all of us. Humiliating. Kate spat. She's the liar here. No, Andrew said firmly, staring her down. Mia lied about one thing, her job. But you've lied about everything else. Our family status, your connections, your accomplishments, it's all been fake. And I'm done pretending it's not. Kate's mouth fell open, stunned. James placed a hand on her shoulder. Let's go, Kate, he murmured. This has gone too far. This isn't over, she hissed as he led her out. You'll regret this. Both of you. When the door slammed behind them, silence filled the room. Andrew turned to me, looking both tired and determined. I'm so sorry for everything my family has put you through, he said quietly. But I need to know, where do we go from here? Before I could respond, my assistant's voice buzzed through the intercom. Miss Paul, sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Beckinsale is in the lobby causing a scene. Security wants to know how to handle it. Andrew and I exchanged a tense look. He reached for my hand. We'll deal with this together, he said firmly. I pressed the intercom button. Send the security footage to my laptop and stand by. Only step in if she disrupts operations. A moment later, the live footage appeared on my screen. Kate was pacing back and forth in the lobby, her face flushed with anger. She stopped random employees, ranting loudly about me. Most of them ignored her, some rolling their eyes as they walked away. Then, she pulled out her phone and waved it in the air. She's stealing clients, she shouted. I have proof right here. Financial documents from Shield Uribe Insurance. My stomach dropped. How had she gotten her hands on those files? They were confidential. Andrew's face turned pale. She works in middle management at Beckinsale. She must have accessed them through her job, he said, his voice filled with disbelief. Without wasting a second, I grabbed my phone and dialed. Mr. Beckinsale, this is Mia Paul. Your employee, Kate Beckinsale, is in my lobby, making threats and attempting to expose confidential client information. Yes, I'll hold. On the screen, Kate continued her tirade. I'll ruin her, she screamed. She's been stealing our best clients. Before I could react, a new voice cut through the chaos. Kate Beckinsale. A poised woman in a sharp suit entered the frame, flanked by two men. She walked straight up to Kate, her expression cold and professional. I'm Jade Goody, legal counsel for Shield Uribe Insurance, the woman said firmly. You are hereby suspended pending an investigation for violating your non-disclosure agreement and attempting corporate espionage. Kate stumbled back, her confidence crumbling. No. You don't understand, she stammered. We understand perfectly, Jade replied icily. Your access to confidential files has been monitored for weeks. This public outburst only confirmed our suspicions. Kate's protests grew louder, but her words were ignored as security escorted her out of the building. Andrew watched the footage in stunned silence, his expression a mix of shock and disbelief. I didn't know she was capable of this, he said finally, his voice trembling. It's not your fault, I said gently, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. But we need to address this openly, with your family, with mine, and with our teams. Andrew nodded, his voice steady despite the turmoil. Together, he said. As we stood side by side, watching security lead a furious Kate out of the building, Andrew turned to me, his brow furrowed. Did you know anything about her work performance? I shook my head. No, but now we know the truth. It's time to move forward with honesty. I found out during the merger discussions, I admitted to Andrew. I'm planning to help her move into a role that fits her skills better. That's one reason I kept my identity a secret. I needed to understand the whole situation before making decisions that could affect her family. Mr. Beckinsale, who stood nearby, gave a faint smile and shook his head. You're always thinking about others, Mia. That's one of the reasons I agreed to this merger in the first place, he said. He adjusted his jacket before adding, Don't worry about Kate. We'll handle the legal issues carefully, especially for Andrew's sake. After Mr. Beckinsale left, the office became quiet. Andrew sat across from me, gazing out the window, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. I need some time, he said softly. This is a lot to process. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. Take all the time you need, I said. At the door, he paused and turned back to me. For what it's worth, he began, I fell in love with Mia the secretary. Finding out you're Mia the CEO doesn't change that. It just means there's more of you I need to understand. When he left, I stayed at my desk, staring at the city lights as they flickered on. My phone buzzed, and I saw a message from James, Andrew's father. Kate's home. She's devastated. She knows what she's lost. When you're ready, we should all talk. Families shouldn't end like this. In the days that followed, I focused on my work, giving Andrew and his family the space they needed. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of Kate's public outburst. A scandal involving corporate espionage during a merger was too juicy for the press to ignore. Thankfully, both companies' PR teams worked hard to keep the damage under control. One evening, as I reviewed the final merger documents, my assistant buzzed in. Miss Paul, the Beckinsale family, is here to see you. I took a deep breath as they entered my office. James walked in first, his calm authority leading the way. Andrew followed, his face unreadable. Finally, Kate entered last. She looked different, her usual confident demeanor replaced with hesitation and vulnerability. She wore simple business clothes, a stark change from her usual flashy designer outfits. Mia, James began, his tone steady, we need to talk. All of us. Kate stepped forward, nervously wringing her hands. I've been in therapy this past week, she said softly. Intensive sessions. Losing the promotion, it broke me. It forced me to face a lot of truths about myself. Her voice trembled as she continued. I know I've caused so much pain, not just to you, but to my own family. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I'm here to try. Please, give me a chance to make things right. I looked at Andrew and James, their faces filled with hope and uncertainty. I realized this was the first step toward healing for all of us. I built my identity around my importance, around my connections, Kate admitted, her voice trembling. But it all fell apart. You tried to hold on by grabbing more, I said gently. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. When I saw the CEO job opening, I convinced myself I deserved it. I thought everyone else had been holding me back. Then, when I learned the truth about you, it shattered what little confidence I had left. Andrew stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Mom, he said softly, there's more you need to share with Mia. Kate took a deep, shaky breath. I've struggled for years, she admitted. I've had a shopping addiction and made up stories about our family status. It all started when James's business ran into trouble about 11 years ago. Instead of facing the truth, I created a fantasy world. Pretending was easier than admitting we weren't who I claimed we were. James spoke up, his voice heavy with guilt. And I let it happen. I thought keeping up appearances would hold us together, but it only made things worse. Kate turned to me hesitantly. Is the merger still happening? I nodded. Yes. Kate, your actions hurt both companies, but they don't erase the good work you've done over the past 21 years. The merger includes a retirement package for long-term employees. It's yours if you want it. Her eyes widened in surprise. After everything I've done? Everyone deserves a second chance, I said firmly. But there are conditions. You must continue therapy, work with HR to create a transition plan, and, most importantly, be honest with yourself and others. Kate broke down, her usual confident demeanor crumbling. She wiped away her tears and looked at me. "I'm so sorry, Mia. For everything. For the way I treated you. For the hurtful things I said." Andrew stepped to my side and took my hand. "We've all learned something from this," he said. "Mom, about honesty. Dad, about enabling. Me, about standing up for what's right. And me, about trusting people with the truth," I added, giving Andrew a small smile. Kate nodded, her tears falling freely now. "Thank you for giving me another chance." 3 months later, Kate quietly retired. The merger went ahead smoothly, and Kate found a new purpose volunteering at a financial literacy program. She wanted to help others avoid the mistakes she had made. By the time spring arrived, the tension between us had faded. Kate was rebuilding her life. Andrew and I were stronger than ever, and our wedding day finally arrived. As I walked down the aisle, I saw Kate sitting proudly in the front row, smiling with genuine warmth. We had all been through so much, but this moment felt like a new beginning, a chance for all of us to build a better future together. Kate stood at the microphone, her voice steady but full of emotion. "A year ago," she began, "I believed status and appearances were everything. But my daughter-in-law showed me the truth. Real worth isn't about money or titles. It's about how you treat people. Mia, thank you for giving our family a second chance. Not because you're a CEO, but because you're a kind and compassionate person." Her words touched everyone in the room, and there wasn't a dry eye in sight. Andrew reached for my hand under the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. We had rebuilt our relationship on honesty, moving beyond the lies and pretenses that had once caused so much pain. I glanced around the room and saw how much had changed. James was deep in conversation with my father, both of them laughing and exchanging business stories. Kate was helping my mother arrange the flowers on a nearby table, her movements calm and unhurried. Our employees were mingling with family members, sharing jokes and smiles. In that moment, I realized something important. Success doesn't mean much if you don't have people to share it with. Andrew leaned in closer and whispered, "Are you happy?" I turned to him with a grin. "Very happy," I replied. "Though I do kind of miss that secretary desk sometimes." He chuckled. "Well, your assistant is going on maternity leave soon," he teased. "Maybe you could fill in for her?" "Don't tempt me," I said, laughing. "I might just go undercover again." Kate, overhearing our conversation, joined in the laughter. This time, her smile was genuine, free from any hint of pretense. She had found something far more valuable than status, peace with who she truly was. As the celebration continued, I thought back to the moment that had started it all, the accidental coffee spill during my first meeting with Andrew. Who would have thought that a little chaos would lead to this? Life's biggest blessings often come in the most unexpected ways. I looked around at the people I loved, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. This moment was the result of second chances, hard truths, and the courage to be authentic. Andrew caught my gaze and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how lucky we are," I said softly. "We've come a long way, and it feels good to finally have everything out in the open." He nodded, his eyes filled with warmth. "We're building something real now," he said. "No lies, no pretending, just us." As the room buzzed with laughter and conversation, I felt a wave of contentment. True success isn't measured in dollars or titles. It's measured in the love you share, the lessons you learn, and the courage to be your true self. And in that moment, surrounded by family, friends, and the man I loved, I knew I had found exactly that.